Hello and welcome to Leisurely Baatein. I'd like to appeal to all my viewers to stay at home, stay safe, and stay positive. My guest today is a man of many attributes. He's an entrepreneur, best-selling author, columnist, and a renowned speaker. Avik Chanda, welcome to Leisurely Baatein.
Hi, Subhadip.
Avik, we're all living in very challenging times, COVID-19. How are you keeping yourself busy?
So, Subhadip, I think part of the reason why I'm able to maintain my sanity, my bearings, right, is being a consultant, right? And you would understand the perspective I'm giving. We've had to work from home even in business as usual times. So the first thing that I had to tell my mind and condition myself is, okay, it's an extended variation of business as usual. Now, obviously, that has a particular elasticity, but the way that I'm going about it is to do as many things as possible. Write bylines, work on my book, work on my startup, and keep myself mentally active, right? Where I am, unfortunately, it's a very old-fashioned kind of a building, so there are no gyms that I can go to, and I'm missing my morning jog in the park, and sometimes evening as well. So I said, all right, if I can't keep myself really physically active, how can I keep myself mentally nimble? So that's my strategy so far.
Right. Avik, you quit a very successful career in consulting to follow your heart. Was it difficult?
It was very difficult because for the longest time, it was around, okay, should I do this? Should I not do this? Okay. And so why did I do it eventually? Why did I take the plunge? Because I wanted to live my authentic self. And it's not about the company that I was working from. And it's not about consulting per se, because even today as a self-employed professional, I do consult for clients. But it's something, that realization that struck me that I'm not really enjoying things that I used to 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And then that begged the question, so what is it that you would enjoy doing? And the answer came up. I would love to research. I would love to write. I would love to publish. I would love to speak. I'd love to engage with people. But I'm not trying to sell a particular solution, but just talk for the sake of it and learn in the process maybe, right? I mean, it sounds completely zany, but I said, look, I've done this, been there, done this now. It's of time, right? Another 5 or 10 years down the line, opportunity, but I may not have the zing in me anymore. So let me do this now. And I just took the plunge.
Right. So Avik, you spent a lot of time in Kolkata. So has the city influenced your body of work?
It has in more ways than one. So if you're talking about the writing part, Kolkata is a city that seems to nurture creativity, seems to nurture sort of out-of-the-box thinking, and definitely research. Although one wouldn't think about it, right? Associate Kolkata with cutting-edge research. Much of my work away from the bylines and away from the business consulting has been doing work related to historical studies and historical topics, right? Non-fiction. And if you're looking at the whole spectrum of beautiful places that are there in Kolkata, talk about the National Library, talk about the collection in the Indian Museum, the Victoria Memorial, the Asiatic Society, the list goes on. And these are places which have that old world charm, which may feel very slow and dusty and not very chic, not very happening, but over time they can grow on you and they give you a haven away from the hustle and bustle of everything else that you're doing. So that's helped me sort of anchor myself in a big way. But coming to even the hustle and bustle, right? My friend and co-founder for the startup in the HR tech space that we're going to launch, someday soon post the lockdown, he's based out of Kolkata. I mean, he's been running his business based out of Kolkata for the last decade. So that's been another reason for me, a big incentive to spend time in Kolkata, particularly during the stage of the product development and, the beta testing, baseline testing, etc.
Right, fantastic. Avik, the 3 books that you have written are, from different genres. I remember the first book was Anchor. I remember I was in the launch in Kolkata. Then the next book was a business book, Command to Empathy. And the third book is a very different genre, Dara Shukoh. And I'm careful in saying Dara Shukoh. Why did you choose such a broad, range of, subjects?
So one major thing, I'll go back to your earlier question, right? When I was taking that monumental plunge to try and reinvent myself and do something completely different in life, one of the things that I told myself, I'm not going to get stuck or even comfortable in a zone which seems to be my own. So I'll give you an example. Before Dara Shukoh, the business book talked about the need for emotional intelligence in the Indian workplace. The fact that it's not there, what is the fallout of that, why do we need to move the needle, how do we move the needle, what will be the benefits, so on and so forth, right? Which I think is very relevant and even today very, very pertinent, more so than ever before.
Right.
That book did really well. And then I had the temptation to follow it up with another similar book and then another one and then another one, right? And that's when I said, okay, Avik, stop. You're getting into that same thing, right? Because then you're making that your new norm and your new comfort zone. So that is option one. The option two is to take up the passion project and do something completely different. And I said, all right, I've always been interested in history, going back to my school days. And, we've been readers of history, of popular history as well, the Dalrymple books, etc. And Abraham Arali back in our student days. I said, okay, I'm going to go back to that. And I was... To a large extent, I would say I was helped by senior writers, friends, mentors, to talk about Amit Chaudhary, Kunal Basu, Chinmay Guha. I actually discussed with them. I said, am I going to do a business book? Because I feel like doing a business book. And then I went to Amit Chaudhary and I said, and Kunal Basu was fine with that. Part of the reason is because he teaches management at the same business school in Oxford. So that would have rung a bell sound. Yeah, go for it, Avik. Not a problem. And then I go to Amit Chaudhary and I say, okay, I want to write about Dara Shukoh. And he says, yes, very interesting character, very fascinating character. How are you going about it? And I said, look, I've got an agent, I've got a contract, I'm just in that negotiation phase. And he said, Avik, is your heart in it? Is that what you're really passionate about? I said, more than anything else at this stage. He said, then go for it. It doesn't matter if you're doing poetry today and essays tomorrow and novels the other day. But if your heart is really in it and you're completely invested in it, then go for it.
Right. Avik, that was, I think, a wonderful piece of advice that, these eminent authors gave you. Because it's not easy to write about anything, on anything, if you're not passionate about it, if your heart is not there. So well done. And I'm sure it was a very difficult topic, not very easy. There's a lot of research that went about writing Dara Shukoh, and well done on the success of the book.
Thanks.
Avik, tell us a little bit about your early life. Some part of it I witnessed it not far from where you sat in Don Bosco Park Circus. But for the viewers, it would be an interesting to.
Sure. So I am a Kolkata boy, or Calcutta, as we used to say back in the day. So born and brought up here, and Subhadip, you and I went to the same school. At that point of time, going to a convent school, an all-boys school for 12 years, when I was going through it, right, it felt incredibly constraining and regimented and even stifling at times.
Right.
But today, when I go back and I look back on it, many of the intrinsic values that we keep sharing, as friends, I'm able to relate it back to the teachers and, the fathers and the people who have taught us. I think that has been an abiding influence. And today I'm very lucky, I think, for that kind of an education, because more than just a love of learning, it inculcated in me, as I'm sure with you, a certain intrinsic set of values, a kind of particular outlook, which thankfully I've never outgrown. And I did my college back in the day. That was that time when presidency was still a college and not a university. So I think once again, I was fortunate in seeing that last sort of flash of light, of brilliance, of lots of good students passing out and professors and so forth. And after that, it's as I said earlier, it's been work, which has been taking me across 3 continents, and very little in Kolkata. And now, after 20 years, the homecoming is quite nice, actually.
Phenomenal. How do you see the world change post COVID-19?
To be honest, I'm learning, as we all are. I'm evolving, and while I'm learning, I'm trying to. That's what I've been doing, during this entire lockdown. I'm trying to write a byline every week,
right?
Taking a particular theme, mainly from the workplace standpoint. Say, all right, so what are the skills of the future going to be? What are the required mindsets going to be of the future, right? Is it going to be skewed more towards, because, earlier it was all about domain skills, technical skills, industry expertise, but now that's become a no-brainer. I mean, that's a given. If you don't have that, you're not even capable to do the job. But as we go into a scenario where there is going to be a huge amount of stress, and we have to be living with that stress and uncertainty, and the vagaries even of job security, no matter what the level or what the grade of the employee is, there will be additional characteristics like grit, resilience, self-efficacy, emotional intelligence, self-esteem, just having faith in oneself, and so forth, which are going to come to the fore. So that's something that I'm exploring through the startup, through psychometrics that I'm curating, and also, with the conversation that I'm having, the bylines I'm doing. So we'll see whether it gets there. But of course, it suffices to say the world that we knew has changed irrevocably. And when we say business as usual, it's not going to be as usual. It's going to be a new norm. And what that new norm is, I don't think anybody can really predict. But yeah.
Right. So it'll be like business as new usual.
Business as the new usual. Exactly. Yes.
So what are
usual?
New usual. Yeah, absolutely. What are we going to see next from author Avik Chanda?
So at the moment, I've got a couple of book projects. I've got a contract for one, and both of them are in the same genre as Dara Shukoh. They are nonfiction and they are history. So that's what I'm doing in terms of books. In terms of writing, the bylines, that's where it's far more current. So I'm trying to toggle between, the early modern era and the late medieval ages on the one hand, and maybe 5 years ahead. So it's a tad bit, schizophrenic, but it's great.
Absolutely. I'm sure, they're keeping you more than busy. Avik, I wanted to ask you the writing process, because there'll be a lot of aspiring authors who watch this show, and I wanted to ask you, when you get into a project, when you start your a book or the writing process, is there a particular process that you follow? What works? I know every author would have their own set of processes.
Yes.
Would be very keen to understand what's the process that you follow. How do you push yourself? Because being an author, it's not that easy. It needs a lot of discipline. So very keen for you to share your process for the benefit of aspiring authors.
Sure. So let me talk about two things. One, which is very intensely personal and subjective. And the second part, which has to do with when you're talking about a market, when you're talking about doing it professionally, and how do I take it to the commercial space? How do I reach out to my readers, etc. Right? So the first part is obviously having the passion and having the kind of sustenance which is purely emotional and intellectual to be able to continue a project for 18 months or 24 months or however long it takes to get to the end of it, to have that kind of it's not just resilience, but it's like reserves of faith and strength and energy and just immersion in the subject. I remember that when I was starting out writing all these books, maybe like 4 years back, 5 years back, there was this great feeling, okay, so Avik is going to write. It's coming to midnight and he's now going to sit down, and he's an author, he's an artist, he's an intellectual, he's going to burn the midnight oil, literally. So I was, very gladly in love with the image of the writer writing at night, right? And that continued for a few days, for a few weeks. And then I said, hey, you know what? This is great, but am I really getting job done? And I said, you know what? There are certain practical considerations. So for example, I have to go to a library in order to do research. And I can't do that particular research online because these are rare books which I have to requisition separately, and there's a separate seat and I have to handle them with care. So in the entire day, I can only go to like 50 or 60 or 100 pages and write my stuff, take my notes. Great. Now the library, unfortunately, is not going to be open from midnight till 3 a.m. in order to infuse and help Avik's creativity and his inspiration. So I said, all right, you know what? The muse is not going to come to me. I have to go to the muse. I have to get pragmatic. And that's when I said, all right, discipline. When I have to go to the library, these are the library hours. So I go in there, I have a slot, a designated place, I can plug in my laptop, and then I'm all set, right? So it doesn't matter whether it feels more exciting or romantic to be writing at 1 a.m. But if the work gets done better between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., then that's what I want to do, right? So that's the subjective part. Okay. Now, taking the mechanics of it, the objective part, for any person who wants to take his writing seriously, as in professionally, it's important to network. You have to start getting to know editors. You have to start getting to know publishers, ideally an agent. And here's what I've found, right? That it was actually easier for me to publish with a top publisher than to find a good editor. And it's easier to get a good editor than to find a good agent, because, agents are few and far between, and they're inundated with different kinds of manuscripts from all across the world, all kinds of aspiring writers, and they're going bonkers all the time. And sometimes, because we're all people, we can make subjective mistakes, and they're always saying, I hope I've not taken a wrong decision by rejecting this person or that, etc. So they're under constant kind of pressure, right? And start churn. I remember it took me 1.5 years in several sort of conversations and 3 different proposals before I finally got myself an editor, an agent, a literary agent who signed up with me. But the good thing is, from that point, she's now got me 3 books, and the 4th is in the works. So writing a proposal, writing a professional, just like a sales proposal, right? If we were to go to a client and we are pitching a software product or a solution or a consulting kind of an assignment, we would have a very structured proposal. Have to write a proposal which is professional, which is structured, which shows that you're serious about it, which shows that you're playing at the next league. And then routing that proposal through the agent, pitching it to multiple publishers, getting the best deal, and then working very closely with the editor. Just like in the workplace, just like with our clients, it's equally important to have a long-term sustaining relationship with your agent and with a very small, maybe select set of editors. Because that's the teamwork, that's the collaborative spirit that's going to take you,
sure,
in the long haul. Yeah.
Fantastic. No, very well, explained. I'm sure it'll benefit a lot of aspiring authors. A question I wanted to ask you is, how do you, as an author, prepare? And perhaps, look out for the next subject that intrigues you to write.
So there's, as you know, right? I mean, you're an author yourself, and there's no knowing, right? That's the fun of it. That's the whole beauty and serendipity of it, because there's no knowing what is going to create a spark and say, maybe I can write about that. So that can be a byline, that could be an opinion piece, or that could be a short story, or that could even be the germ of the next, 100,000 word book. I think the best thing is to be as curious about the world as possible, to be as open-ended as opposed to opinionated as possible. Because when you have all your window open, right? Sooner or later, rather sooner rather than later, you're going to have things coming into that through that open window, which will kindle your imagination and kindle your interest, and then you're going to go. There's no really any fixed method as such.
Right. Very well put. Very well put. Before I let you go, Avik, any words of advice to aspiring authors watching this show?
So in terms of aspiring authors, right, the first thing is to keep reading, because there's always a tendency to say, all right, now I have to concentrate on my own work, right? The moment you start to do that and you're completely immersed in your own work, in your own style, in your own method, whatever it is, right? There can be a tendency to become a little solipsist. Yeah. Now that solipsism can be a little dangerous. So it's always important to keep that open mind and keep yourself exposed and keep yourself open to all kinds of influences. Continue to read all the time. The more you read, the more you're exposed, the more you learn, the more perspectives you have, and that way your own articulation gets that much sharper, that much better, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time, right? Or think of things that have already been articulated beautifully and argued better than I can possibly ever, right? So you learn from that, and then you peer over the shoulders of giants and say, okay, now I can see a little bit over the horizon, maybe, right? So keeping the faith is the next thing. For any kind of a writer, unless it's a question of I'm writing, because that's another thing that's coming up, right? So people write bylines, people write blogs, and then they make a compilation, a collection of that, an edition of that, and that becomes a book. That is far easier to sustain, because I'm doing a byline like every week or every 2 weeks, and that becomes a book. That's much easier. But when you have an idea about a story, a narrative, a novel, and you're going through that, it's that journey that you are going through for years, definitely for several months, you need to have that staying power, right? So you have to keep the faith. And there may be times when your editor challenges you, when your agent does not see eye to eye, when your friend or partner or somebody whose opinion you really trust looks at it and says, hey, Avik, this doesn't seem to be as interesting or as engaging as what you wrote earlier. Are you sure this is really your thing? Yeah. That happened to me big time, right? History, but you're not an academic historian, Avik. Why do you want to write on history? Are you sure you're doing the right thing? This is a long project. You're saying 300 plus words, 100,000 words, 300 plus pages. Are you sure you really want to do it, right? To be able to not disregard this, to process all these questions and have the internal conviction and strength to be able to answer them, not repress them, but answer them and then go on. And I think going on is what writing is all about.
Very well said. I mean, I remember I was in Brisbane about 2.5, 3 years back, and I was contemplating about writing a book, and it was a moment where I had to really reconcile with my self-doubts, and finally I started putting pen on paper, and the first words, the first sentences, the first pages, rewriting drafts, and
yes.
It was a very, very painful process where I had to really push.
It can be exhilarating, but it can also be, it can completely drain, sap all the energy out of you. It's like, my God, why am I even doing this, right? There was kind of moments. And then you have to steel yourself and then go back the next day and say, yes, I can. And I should, because that's it.
Absolutely. Avik, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me on Leisurely Baatein.